Okay, so I'm Mel. I'm the program officer with Great Family Foundation. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have the privilege of being our panel host for this conversation today. I also have the privilege of working for Great Family Foundation, where I get a chance to learn about folks that are starting or expanding their outdoor school programs. We have a grant program we offer that helps folks launch new outdoor school programs, as well as sort of expand or adapt our existing program. So I've had the chance to connect with all these folks and excited for them to share a little bit about what they've been up to and starting new programs or adapting their program to sort of fit better with sort of the current world order we exist in now. And so I want to make sure they all have plenty of time to share. So we're going to go through they're each going to share a little bit about their program and things that they learned sort of launching a new program. And then we'll have time hopefully at the end for questions. If you have a question that comes up for you in the course of the conversation, you can feel free to add it into the chat box, but just in the interest of time, we'll try to make sure everybody gets a chance to share their presentation first and then respond to questions at the very end. I'm going to spotlight the speaker so that you can sort of focus on that person, but if your preference is to see the gallery view, you can always go and change that in your settings in Zoom. And if you need help with that, just type in the chat box and we can help support you via chat. And yeah, I think that is everything. I also am grateful for Rita and Chris, who are here to kind of be the co-hosts and supports today. So again, if you need anything, you can reach out to any of us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, who can introduce herself first. And I'm going to share some slides for her and spotlight her. So awesome. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Nell. I'm Suzanne Willow, and I am the interim executive director, which is to say I've been volunteering for 3 years now, and we believe we are actually going to start hiring someone professional. So we're at the Crest, which is located on 445 acres of very interesting ecosystems with forest and wetlands. This happens to be some kids using our binoculars to study the highest elevation breeding population of western pond turtles in Oregon and Washington. And our land is high. It's at almost 5,000 feet. This particular pond is about 4,850. So we've had a study to find out what pond turtles do in the winter when they don't just get out and sit on the land, and put a bunch of tracking on, and the answer is they stay in the water because it's a lot warmer than the snow. So we have been doing a lot of day programs in the past, and then we had an outdoor school development grant from Gray Family Foundation and really worked up a place-based curriculum. And then, oh, wait a minute, it was COVID. So we actually have not had a residential program yet. And in the meantime, we realized that our campground, which is very rustic, basically all outdoors, we were going to develop, we were going to have kids in tents on the ground. And then we went, wait a minute, maybe not everybody can do that. So we actually got another grant, an accessibility grant from OSU, and we are making our entire campground ADA accessible, and really looking at accessibility of all of our programs. And importantly, we're making 10 new wall tents that are going to be on slabs, basically, and so people who use wheelchairs can stay pretty much anywhere at our campground. And we've always had an ADA accessible bathroom. Our cookhouse was the same, but we're improving our trails, of course, and our gathering areas. And that was a big one for us. So day programs, we switched to day programs. And of course, we couldn't do any in 2020. In 2021, we were asked by Talent Elementary School, and They asked us to do a virtual 6-week program. So we developed this entire program, made bags to give everything to the kids. You're going to hear a lot of this, I think, from everybody else. Made bags to send out to the kids, had one virtual 45-minute time. And then they said, oh, wait a minute, kids can come to school. Can you come to the school next week? So we went to the school for the next few weeks. Then they said, oh, wait a minute, kids maybe can go on an outing. So we ended up with 3 programs in one. So over a 5-week period ended up, we had on-site day program. We had an in-class program, sending our teachers there. And then we had a virtual program. And we still had students. The important thing to know about this particular area is we are just up outside of the Rogue River, the Rogue Valley. And the Rogue Valley is this lovely, long valley. And a fire started in Ashland on September 8th, 2020, which happened to be the very first day of school. And started, and there was a huge, huge wind, and the fire swept down valley, got to part of Medford, and took out 2 towns, took out the towns of Talent and Phoenix. Huge amounts of especially housing, but a lot of part of the downtown of those 2 small towns. So probably 2,400 kids. The Talent Phoenix School District estimated that 1.70% of their kids were unhoused because their houses were destroyed. So huge, huge effect. And we started both that outdoor school and then our summer programs. We suddenly went, oh, wait a minute. These kids not only have not been in school, and these kids have had all this difficulty with COVID, but also how do they learn how to be together? How do they learn to be outside? How can we help them? So our entire programs, all of our programs, both outdoor school and summer programs, which are day programs now, are all trauma informed. So we had done the ACEs training for everybody, CPR training, a lot of work together as a group. And now we've kind of taken that another step because it's so important. And the other thing that's probably important in this particular area, and I'll get to the next slide in a second, is farm, forest, wetlands, cultural history, and wildlife, which is to say we have a pretty very rustic wild area, which is great. And this actually is home site to the Takelma, upland Takelma, Ligdawa people who were, of course, forced out of here in the 1850s. So we have a lot of cultural sites. We have a few cultural sites. We have done some archaeology work with Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes, Indians of the Siletz, who are where the places that people were moved from to go here. We're planning to do our first fall session in our newly accessible, newly redone outdoor school for this fall of 2023. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we, Nell, can you, there you go. Okay, thank you. One of the things about this land, you'll see those are wetlands and wet meadows in the back, and then forests surrounding. This happens to be a farm. We have a certified organic farm. We raise goats. We have a little goat dairy. We raise chickens, and of course have eggs. And we have certified organic vegetables that we don't plant until June because we're at 5,000 feet. So we have been selling our vegetables here and there, and we realized that the connection of farm to food, every program we've always had, the kids have something to do with the garden. The kids get to, before COVID, when we could all share a lot of food, the kids were harvesting and collecting eggs. We were boiling the eggs. We were having a nice big shared salad with hard boiled eggs. So the kids really got a sense of what it's like to connect to where food is, and that's the food you eat. And we do tasting tables. So we have done the tasting tables, and this happens to be a summer program last year, but the tasting table is really kids being able to, all students, not only learning about the foods, being able to deal with the garden and seeing that food, but being able to take it home to their families. And that's going to be a huge piece of our program going forward. So we're not selling our vegetables anywhere else. We're just doing our vegetables for our own programs. And our cookhouse was designed to be able to have, I don't have a picture of it, to be able to have a number of small groups working together. So we kind of have 3 little kitchenettes for the kids to be able to do cooking and some food prep. So that's a part of our outdoor school. The site limitations and accessibility, I kind of talked to. Building relationships with schools has been difficult. It's been quite difficult. There was, we have an AmeriCorps member this year and last year, wonderful, wonderful folks. And they probably each sent out about, 60, maybe 80 emails talking about our outdoor school program. We were approached by one school last year, and literally the day before we started this 6-week virtual, when we had all our information, they said, "Oh, can you do the other classes at that elementary school? Do you think you could put on the other elementary schools, the other 2 elementary schools in our in Talent Phoenix?" And the answer was no, we couldn't do it at that point because everything was too well planned and we'd ordered stuff a long time ahead. So looking at that type of outreach, and I know somebody talked yesterday about doing, I think it was Andy, talked about doing programs without a contract yet, that the contract didn't quite get signed. So we've had the same thing. So for us, the name recognition, getting people up here, I'm so glad that Outdoor School this year is able to help with coach rental for getting kids here, because that's a huge thing. We're only 11 miles from the freeway, but it is all uphill. And so the school buses go very slowly. And of course, they can't leave the schools until after they've done the 3 runs now, at least in this area. So very short on school bus drivers specifically. And that's having be able to use coaches, excuse me, use coaches will be a huge addition this year. And we had a school bus rental last summer to get these kids up to the summer day camp. So I think that's probably most of what I want to say. Is a lot of new stuff and changing stuff in the middle of while we're developing and outreach and bringing more schools in.
Thanks so much, Suzanne, for sharing. And also just want to sort of acknowledge and appreciate the example you shared just about the Talent Elementary School reaching out and engaging with you in particular, just because I think a lot of the experiences folks that I've heard about over the last couple of years has been sort of being responsive to what the schools and what's happening in communities, because I think it's varied in different ways. And so just want to acknowledge that was just an awesome support that you all provided in that case. So very cool. So I'm going to switch it over to Erica, and Erica, I'm going to spotlight you now and get you going. So.
Okay, thank you. I think you have my slides, so thanks so much. So while you're getting those up, I'm Erica Wrench. I'm with a brand new organization that's underneath a 25-year-old organization. So the organization is Gorge Ecology Outdoors is the nonprofit, and Gorge Ecology Outdoor Education is the outdoor school portion of that just started brand new in 2021 last spring. And so thank you for asking me to reflect on this. And I also want to acknowledge what Bill said. I've been the recipient of Gray Family Foundation support when I worked for Confluence Project, working with Native Americans, and I just can't thank them enough for again supporting the work as I'm building curriculum for this outdoor school that's culturally responsive from the Indigenous Native American perspective. So thank you sincerely. I'm also feeling a little humbled after being in so many sessions, and I'm so new, so I have more questions than answers, but hopefully this reflection can be helpful. So I'll start just with the dream briefly. It began in 2017 when I was at the Oregon Indian Education Association annual conference where I was presenting, and an idea just came up to create a cultural outdoor school that was led and organized and run by Native Americans. And at the time, the capacity wasn't there. And so the dream laid a little dormant up until 2020. And that's when along with a team of about 2 other folks, we began to again talk about what could be and could we do an outdoor school here in the Mid-Columbia Gorge. I live in Hood River. But we stretch and try to think of the Columbia River as not having boundaries, state boundaries. So we're envisioning outdoor school for our rural region that would be shaped by indigenous land-based and indigenous land-based educational approach. So I did end up being able to team up with Gorge Ecology Outdoors, and who's been delivering programming for a very long time. And at that time, this was in 2019, 2020, and the pandemic just made it seem impossible that outdoor school could even happen. But in April of 2021, I had given up a little bit of that hope, thinking that I'd have to come back to it again at another time. I got a call from a friend who's been doing outdoor school for the middle school here in Hood River, where my daughter went. And he said, you know, we've had to cancel our programming. We don't want to go and do online outdoor school. Do you think you could pull something together for 275 kids in 6 weeks? And I said yes. And I went back to my roots of programming and offered a model that I thought could work, which is field sites. We live in an amazingly diverse place that has so much perspective from the Native American presence here on the river. I felt like I could pull back some of the programming that I remembered I did do in the same area. So we did 3 sites in 3 days, and we're able to offer 18 hours of instruction. We had such limited capacity with schools. Our schools here were only going until 1 o'clock every day. So we had could barely get enough time, but we did it. We went to 3 different places. We went to a park over on the Washington side called Jewett Creek. We went to Punch Bowl Falls Nature Park here, which to this day has fishing platforms and a strong Native American presence of the Warm Springs Wasco people. And we went up to a campground park called Toll Bridge, and it rained on us, and the kids were absolutely thrilled to be out. And the camp had at that time a dream of, I was imagining 3 areas of focus, one being science wonder, one being wild self, and the third being cultural survivance. And so that was really the beginning. We weren't necessarily developing curriculum at that point because 6 weeks was a very short time period to pull things together, but it was the beginning of what would later become, through grants from Gray Family and also an EDI grant from OSU, would help us to start to develop more fully these day programs and ultimately a curriculum that will be delivered when we go overnight into our overnight program. So we ended up getting all 275 kids. We had 12 instructors and 3 at each site. And it was amazing. We had shelter building going on and native plant walks and cultural stories and resilience work and social emotional games, and then good old-fashioned science with water studies and microinvertebrates. So the challenges, so that was really the building time, and we're now into our second season of developing the curriculum that now we're getting ready to pilot for our second round. But the spring programming back in 2020 had some challenges. The main challenges were the scheduling, trying to figure out when the buses would arrive and how each place would rotate. Everybody had to walk in. It was in natural settings. So we had to figure out how to get all the kids through the content that we wanted to deliver with all the different timing and scheduling. That was a good feat to figure out. There were no floaters on the site to really help keep the stations and the flow going. And this year when we do this, that'll be different. We'll have a nurse and a floater there. And I think that will, as kind of the nurse and floater, to really help keep things moving and answer questions for teachers. And some of the sites were challenging because of the physical abilities of the students or limitations of the students. So this year, again, we lesson learned, and we're looking at making sure that the sites have some appropriateness for differing abilities. The major disappointment for me was in the short time, we didn't have a lot of time to cross-pollinate our curriculum. So everybody was a little bit in a silo at their site. But this year, again, this will be very different. And doing day site field study where every kid, all the groups, 45 kids would arrive at one site and spend the whole day there. And then the next site go to another, the next day go to another site, was wonderful an experience, but we never had the camp cohesive feeling. So it never really felt like camp. So in the fall of 2021, that the same school district wanted programming again, which was a good sign, and hoping this time that we could go residential, we started looking for sites. This was still a big fingers crossed and a big iffy if it was going to go residential. But our biggest challenge was that Geode has no home-based facility. We are without that, and in some ways it provides a lot of flexibility and responsiveness on our part, and in other ways it proves challenging when we're trying to figure out where we can go. We also can't cross state lines, so even though the gorge, how we see it living here, we don't see state lines. Funding sees state lines, so we couldn't find some of the great camps that are actually available in Washington, which was challenging. Ultimately, we did find a family ski resort here near us that was willing to contract with us, and we rented out their little lodge at Cooper Spur. But we did do a lot of fishing. So first we started at Camp Merriweather, this brand new, beautiful camp on the coast from Boy Scouts of America, who very much wanted to help us. But that was too far away. And then we did find Camp Collins, which also very accommodating and eager to work with us. And we got really close to that when we found out that we had to go day only and there'd be no overnight. And then we had no buses. And so about 2 weeks before we were, and so then we shifted to trying to stay local so that the local school district could provide busing. And about 2 weeks before programming was to start, I got a call saying we have no drivers. So fortunately, I think in this way, being rural and knowing your relationships and knowing your neighbors goes so far. I made a call to another neighboring school district. They did have bus drivers, and we were able to work with them to get our kids to camp. Those bus drivers were pulling 14-hour days to get our kids to camp, which was really phenomenal. So as a program director and chief bottle washer, I think my biggest challenge during this time of 2021, and it continues to be, is working with the availability of my staff that I have and holding the big vision of what I know is possible when I am also the main one so deep in the weeds of the logistics. So I would say that's probably my biggest challenge. The gems is being rural. We're really able to be responsive to not only the school district, but also to be creative. And another gem is our location. We don't have a facility, but we have such an amazing, diverse ecological landscape in every regard. We can be in desert, and we can be in almost a semi-tropical rainforest. We can be in the snow. We can be by water within 30 minutes of where we live. So that diversity is a huge benefit to our being able to be responsive to the school's needs. But the biggest gem for me are the instructors. I brought in, again, in a rural community, you rely really heavily on your relationships. So I started making calls, and every single call I made of, are you interested in doing this? I got a yes, which was astounding and humbling for me. So when we started to write our curriculum, every single one of the instructors wrote their own curriculum. They worked in teams of 3. And these are the same folks that raise their kids here and live and work here. So being local, knowing the place, knowing the places that we're going, then how to adapt that curriculum very specifically to these places. We take field trips ourselves as a team and drive around and say, how could the curriculum we've developed fit within these landscapes? It's not how can that we use the landscape, it's how can we work with the landscape to deliver the content we want to deliver. So I think I'm ready to go to the next slide. Thank you. So seeing with new eyes and going forward is my nod to a mentor of mine, Joanna Macy, but it's really about what I learned and I think what we learned and how we're going to move forward from this place as we get ready for spring programming this year, which will be again day trips. And the main reason we decided to do that is in the pandemic, after going and listening to some wonderful panels that OSU had, panel discussions on hearing the anxiety of parents and students, we have a lot of pretty strong barriers to participation at one of our middle schools. And when we did our programming as field site days, we got 100% participation. And in the past, one of the middle schools has lost up to 30% of the kids because of cultural barriers to participation. So really going back to our mission of why are we here, it was to reach the kids as much as we could. So we chose as a team with the school district to go day only. So what I've learned is MESD is a wonderful resource for someone brand new. They have lots of ways. They'll let you download all their documents, like their master schedule that they made available to download was so helpful to me to see how to start scheduling. I had no clue how to do this. So I didn't have to reinvent the documents, which is so helpful. I could just fit them to my group and my situation. I also learned about nurses, having them at all 3 sites we really need. And they're such an important part of keeping the feeling of safety, the container, and the support, just that that encouragement and support to the kids, of some of the kids that needed to come and just kind of chill out somewhere for a while. And they're also great floaters, I've learned. Kind of, I'll step in wherever you need me, I'm here to help. You'll see the picture down below, the essential workers. I've learned, so I have so much gratitude for them. And I also learned acts of gratitude go a long way. A little story about that picture. She's holding a card that as a staff, we made thank you cards for all the bus drivers. And I walked over and I said, can I take your picture? And, you know, I'm putting together a slideshow and I'd love to include you. You made this possible. Without you, we couldn't have done this. And I gave her the card and she teared up and said, I can't believe you're doing this. And so it really spoke to me about how important that reciprocity is. I also learned that the site really does matter for changes in weather, making sure we have adequate shelter and toilets. And making it feel like camp really matters. So the first time we tried it with the field sites and it didn't feel like camp, the second time when we went and had kids come every day to the same site mattered. They got a feeling of camp. We did all camp games. We had kids rotate around to different interactive games. We did some crafts. It was camp. It felt like camp. We waved them in as they showed up for the day, and we said goodbye to them as they left for the day. And so I really want to try to keep that going for this year. And so this coming spring, it's going to be a hybrid where one day we go to camp and to the school and we introduce what we're doing. We set our expectations. We do some crafts. Then the second, third, and fourth days we'll be traveling to the field sites. And then the fifth day, we're going to bring them all together to one big site and have camp and do rotating games and a celebration. And if we have a good old cookout, I think that they'd be really happy about that. I found that kids just really want to have fun. That was really, they wanted time together. They loved the time outside. That's why I put that very cold, very dirty, and very fun. Even when it was snowing on them, they were still thrilled to be out. And I want to make sure that we have time for kids to just be outside, so they can connect. So just sorry.
I want to make sure there's just enough time for Sammy and
okay, sorry. Yeah,
no, you're just fine. I really appreciate all your sharing. I just want to make sure that they have enough, but I really appreciate all of that because I think it's really important for folks to hear, especially a program that's so new, navigating all of the things that happened the last year.
Okay, thank you
very much. Thanks, Erica. I'm going to hand it over to Sammy so he can share a little bit, and then Megan can go after that. So Sammy, you can go ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you. You know, my predecessors there laid down a lot of common overlap between what some of our challenges are, as outdoor school is really diverse. Luckily, we have that flexibility. So folks like Suzanne that have a site but no program can get into it, and folks like Erica that have a vision, an idea, and a program but no site can do that. And so I echo some of the complications that they see with both of those things. Before I get to some of my slide, I would also echo that training staff or getting a hold of staff. We're also a very rural community in far eastern Oregon and Malheur County, which has a very low population density, and most of that population is in the city of Ontario or town of Ontario. It's under 20,000 people that we're working out of. So our limitation in capacity and staff is literally finding people that don't already have 1 to 2 jobs or that have the capacity to do this, whether it's time or training. So that's one, working in a rural community that's been very difficult. But as the culture grows, so does our access to folks who are willing to join. Then similarly, we're having trouble with bus drivers, right? The passenger, certification is very rare. Again, in a rare community, the bus drivers are already being used, and those companies don't really want to share their bus drivers. So that's been difficult. And then similarly, to Erica, we don't have a site, so we're dependent on going out to a field site, which one makes the bus drivers critical, as well as the curriculum or doing something while we're on the bus, because that seems like a lot of almost lost time that we have off of the landscape. So that's been complicated. And then also, Erica mentioned sort of the flow of things, having floaters, having some consistency between groups, knowing where one group is supposed to go next, all of those types of dynamics. And that's almost part of curriculum building. Those things are all, very dynamic and wrenches that sometimes they play out on site. So when I first started teaching in university years ago, one of my mentors told me, you got to teach a class at least 3 times, and you got to do all the mistakes until you figure out that 4th time where you do. And it seems to me, my experience, a lot of things are that way. And outdoor school has been one of those, where it really takes getting out there and enacting all of it with all 200 of your kids. And what goes wrong that time is just going to go wrong. And you got to roll with those things and know that you can change it for next time. So that the floaters, as an example, the nurses being used for floaters, I'd never thought of that. That's great. Totally going to do that this year. So thank you to Great Family Foundation and Friends of Outdoor School and the Extension Service for hosting things like this, that we can learn from our colleagues and our peers, that we're not an island doing this alone. And of course, my regional coordinator, Sarah, she's on here. Our coordinators that we're in touch with are so implemental as that connection between provider, between district, between grantor, and all of the above. So, all right, I'll get on. That was sort of my overlap with some of the other presenters or panelists thus far. So I'll get on to my slide here. We are the highlighted county in red there, Malheur County. I'm from an organization called the Friends of the Owyhee. So we are not just, we're Malheur County based technically, but as a watershed stewardship and environmental group and conservation, land conservation advocacy group, we work beyond border largely, and also into the Treasure Valley. So we're working with a much larger area conceptually as far as our larger organization goes. And when we began youth programming back in 2018, we started going towards directions of just, some weekend camps with a dozen students, playing on some of the strengths from my background. And the vision of outdoor school has always been there. But in a rural community with no residential camps or very few places that we can have gatherings anyway, it was difficult to envision just starting outdoor school. And so that laying of the vision and then slowly building has been really important. So we began youth programming, and then this leg of being able to focus on outdoor school is somewhat fortuitous. Working with the school district first as their outdoor school coordinator to help them for a couple of years. And then as the program director under Friends of the Owyhee, sort of taking on the project of outdoor school and trying to build it into our community rather than it being something that we are taking all of our school district children and sending them out of county, out of region, which is great to get out of our biome. But we really saw the whole community involved in outdoor school, that we have no local resource for our local kids to connect with our local place-based environment. So that's a problem. So when asked to be on this panel, the question is, what have new programs and sites learned about getting started with outdoor school? So I'm thinking and I'm hoping that, there's many of you who are already very well involved with outdoor school, but really hoping that there is a lot more thought out there Oregon-wide about diversifying outdoor school and offering new, smaller programs to diversify the experience for all Oregonians. In my case, it's offering that place-based education to people where they live is really important. And that's part of our educational mission at Friends of the Owyhee, is offering place-based education to connect the Owyhee with the local people. So the 3 columns of text that I have there, I'll start on the far left-hand side. These are sort of my, maybe what I've learned or what we've gone through, what it takes. And then down at the bottom in the asterisk is, this is what I've learned. And this is what I want to communicate to anybody that's sort of starting a new program or thinking about this, or maybe 2 or 3 years in, from my perspective. So it is a labor of love, just like almost all educational endeavors, as we all know. It really takes that leadership mentality to know that you want to do this, that there is a will, there is a way, we're going to make it happen. And without specific leadership, things fall apart. Who's going to take what? I thought you were, it takes that leader mentality. So hopefully you're ready for that. And appoint yourself to that. If you're really serious about starting outdoor school and you understand the need for your community, then do it. The resources are out there. There are hundreds and thousands of us that are encouraging you through this network to do it. So there's plenty of funding potential. It's just connection with all of the people involved, right? Like being here. Then it's also important to identify that you have an expertise, whatever that might be. But if you're a person who's thinking about running outdoor school and you are, say, outdoorsy, or you have a connection to wildlife or a connection to lichen, I'm a geologist by background, or maybe just an educator that understands the value of nature in our students' lives, then identify your expertise early on and then begin building from that expertise. And so that'll come in a minute when discussing finding your niche. Then it's really important to begin that network and to discuss yourself as leading this outdoor school project, and start funneling as much contact as you can to whether you're the identified leader, whether there's another identified leader, or ideally, and here's my asterisk, is that you begin an advisory committee early on. If you're starting from the ground up, drumming up the interest for a little while, but then getting a few people, 4 to 5 that are all about this in a room that can meet regularly, so progress is not lost. Okay, so an advisory committee is what I'd recommend there. Then a little more about finding your niche. This is kind of multifaceted, and one of those is your expertise. What do you bring to the table? So the second bullet point there is, what are your strengths? Are you a wildlife biologist? Are you interested in water chemistry? Do you like soil? Do you like forestry? Is it the sagebrush? What is the natural strength element that you're bringing to the table? And maybe that's pure curriculum development. But just finding that early on, so your whole advisory committee can work with that as well, and you can identify new partners that have other strengths. And then the first bullet point there, what is offered? Spending some time looking at whether it's your local community or region, what else is actually out there. I don't necessarily like to see it as competitors. We're all sort of in this outdoor ecology together and doing the same thing, so that we're not really competitors as much as we are collaborators, but identifying what your collaborators are kind of already doing and then working out from there. Now, in our case, there's a complete vacuum of environmental education and frankly, outdoor education. We've lost, Boy Scout troops, which is the only small thing that we had. 4-H isn't doing much either, unfortunately. So figuring out what's offered in your community and then finding those small overlaps, but also developing your niche outside of that. And then I've found, and I feel like personally, it's very important to demonstrate your capacity early on. And so the way that this manifests is if you're beginning this program and you need to have that connection with local schools, getting out to those local schools as a guest, using your strengths and using your niche to just approach a sixth grade teacher, right? Email elementary school principal and say, hey, is there any way I can come in and talk about Leap Day? Or is there anything I can talk about on Earth Day? Whoever's going to let you in is, well, that's great, right? Just getting in the door in that way, whether this is a guest volunteer or working up to something like a guest day programming. So there's a variety of things you can do to demonstrate your capacity to the schools. And then lastly here is community solutions. And I think Erica put this really well. In a rural community, you know, knowing everybody and all of these facets is really important. And you're gonna maybe receive good feedback, like Erica, of people who are like, yes, we want to do this, or you're gonna receive like, no, what do you mean we should do this? I can't spend my work time doing something like that. And so be ready for all of that, working out into your local community and finding those solutions in all facets. So using your niche, then working with the school districts, obviously, whether that's from the top down or sort of from the bottom up, I think are both really good ways to get into the schools. And then working with local nonprofits, again, finding your niche, and if you can grab other niches to work together, all the better. And then government. So again, I've mentioned that we do not have a facility. We do not have a residential camp. It was really important for us last year to work with our city government to go to a city park. It might also be important this year that we do that. We have a relationship with the Bureau of Land Management, our public land agency, and the Oregon State Parks to go to Oregon or to go to state parks. So working with government groups and permitting and all of those additional pieces is also very, very important. So I would say my aspect there, a point to take away, is engage in all of the community. The Chamber of Commerce is important. The local hardware store owners are important. In this endeavor that is so broadly oriented for youth and the betterment of the environment and education, nobody in the community is not, everybody is a part and can help in this endeavor of letting Outdoor School be a champion in your community. So I guess that's my 2 cents on all of it, on seeing a program kind of start from the ground up. And boy, it still feels like sometimes we're really close to the ground, but then I look back at 2019 and realize so much growth. So thanks for the opportunity to share now.
Thank you so much, Sammy. And thank you all. I really appreciate the examples that all felt very much like emphasize the importance of different kinds of relationship building and sort of lifting up sort of what you said, like finding your niche and meeting those needs of the schools and school districts around you and adapting to kind of your landscape you're in. So just appreciate you all sharing different ways that looks. We are over our time. So Megan has graciously offered to share her information in a different format. So appreciate you all for that. And I've put the evaluation in the chat box. And so definitely would love you all to share feedback there. And then if you have any questions for any of our presenters or panel folks, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I will do my best to get those responses out